The gaming industry is a massive and growing business. That's pretty obvious. What's less obvious to non-gamers is how the gaming industry pushed cloud technology, cybersecurity innovations, and social media long before social existed. For Tech Republic and ZDNet, my name is Dan Patterson. With J. Todd Coleman, he is the co-founder and CEO of Artcraft. They are the publisher of the upcoming game Crowfall. Todd, thanks a lot for your time today.
I think
thanks
for having me.
Within the gaming industry and for gamers, we can kind of go back to the late 90s or early 2000s and the emergence of connected systems and what we now call the cloud. But at the time, these were pioneering innovations. And I wonder if, excuse me, before we talk about the future of game technology in the business, if you could kind of contextualize some of the history and the problem solving skills you had to apply as entrepreneurs in the late 90s and early 2000s in terms of kind of figuring out a lot of the technologies that enterprise business is only just now figuring out.
Yeah, sure. And I think you're spot on that. It's kind of interesting that games have always kind of driven technology. They as an audience, the audience tends to be incredibly tech savvy and very much early adopters. They're willing to try out new things because, fun experience is kind of always right around the next corner. So you've seen that, historically, not only have games kind of driven hardware, like, the newest, coolest PCs are always made to run the newest, coolest games. But you've also seen it with the advent of the internet starting to drive other technologies as well. Gaming was really, virtual worlds were social media and connectivity tools before such a thing existed. Things like internet security and cryptocurrency, for example, being able to buy virtual items with credits instead of buying them with real world money, or rather buying credits for real world money and then using that to buy virtual currency. All of this existed long before things like Facebook and Bitcoin were common terms that were generally understood. So I think you've just seen generally over the course of the last, couple decades, games has always been at the forefront of pushing new ideas. And once they kind of, as a proving ground in that petri dish of the games industry, once they prove out, then they migrate and find their way into other areas. I mean, software as a service, effectively, that business model started in games, in, 90-something, 95 or something with Ultima Online, maybe earlier. And before that, right, GenieNet and Prodigy and these other services offered software as a service to consumers before that was a thing, before that was actually an acronym or a term.
Was there a light bulb moment at any point where you realized, oh, we kind of figured out some things that other companies or other industries really haven't? And how did you go about the problem solving of figuring out how to monetize and how to really make cloud, social, and even cyber defense not necessarily profitable, but optimized for the product?
So it's going to sound kind of weird, but these are basically survival traits, right? So the thing about the games industry is that it changes and reinvents itself in a very, very fast cycle compared to other industries. It is hit driven to some degree, or to a large degree, but it's also constantly shifting in terms of what is important to our audience, right? So you've got technology that changes underneath you incredibly rapidly. You've got new norms and new advances in terms of internet connectivity and communications. That changes constantly. You've got billing models that change constantly, right? It goes from retail to direct digital distribution to free to play to whatever. And those changes happen literally like every couple years. The ground underneath our feet is constantly shifting, right? If we're not on top of what the newest trend is for marketing, for operations, for security, for whatever, for community management, for whatever else, we die. I mean, quite frankly, it's like you've got extinction level events happening in our industry at a constant cadence. So what happens is you have this constant trial and error of companies trying out anything they can to survive. The interesting thing out of that is it means that you have new companies that are basically kingmakers, kind of situation. You have new companies that are springing up out of nowhere, and suddenly they're incredibly valuable, right? Like Supercell went from nothing to, oh my God, we're worth billions of dollars within a very, very short period of time. And then you have the opposite as well. You have very large companies that just don't adapt quickly enough, and they start to falter, and then eventually they either get swallowed up by somebody else or they just go away. So I think it's a survival mechanic, quite frankly. I think you could think of the games industry as a giant genetic algorithm for trying these ideas out. And the ones that work and survive sometimes then migrate over and find life in other industries.
I'm so glad that you mentioned that in your words, the cadence of change is kind of inherently built into gaming. Are there lessons that other companies can learn from watching how game companies that have survived iterate and evolve without losing the core of their business?
Probably. I mean, it's a little hard for me to being inside it like I am. It's a little hard for me to kind of go back to my business days and think about what it would look like from the outside. But there certainly are areas that I think everybody agrees in the future could or should become massive, right? VR obviously is a little bit more debatable, but I don't know that anybody really debates AR at this point. And what's funny is the fundamental technologies there are things that we've been doing for years, right? Creating and modeling 3D assets and rendering them in 3D space, dealing with lighting and physics and momentum and gravity, all of the pieces that require heavy computation of massive number of objects existing in the same 3D space, and how do those objects call with each other and interrelate with each other. That's all stuff that we've been doing forever. So I think that there are definitely areas of crossover technology where it's like, showing up in an entirely new country and then finding out that there's a common base of language that you didn't realize was there. It's an enormous advantage for people coming into these spaces because they're already that much further along in the learning curve. And I actually saw this happen with massively multiplayer games. The people who were at the forefront of that were the people who really had already cut their teeth on text-based gaming back in the early days of the internet. And if you look at kind of all the early pioneers there, they showed up day one, and there were all these lessons that were immediately applicable. And so they were able to effectively jump that much further along on the bell curve or on the learning curve. So I think you're going to see the same kind of thing. What those burgeoning technologies are and where those industries go, that I don't know. I mean, we can see some of them like VR and AR and things like that, education. But there's a whole bunch of them that I don't, that nobody really sees. And I think that's really fascinating and really exciting about the place that we find ourselves in right now.
Are there lessons that you learn from the users in game development, as with software development? There is or can be lengthy beta and development processes that really enhance the product and allow a company to stay nimble as they're building a product. So what do you listen to when you look for feedback from the audience?
Yeah, so that's a really challenging one, and we do have a unique perspective on that. So I've kind of done every model of fundraising you can do for games, right? I've done venture capital, I've done angel financing, we've done crowdfunding, we've done Title III, Reg CF, like we've done kind of everything you can do to raise money. Traditional publishers being kind of an obvious one as well. So we've gone down every road there is. This particular game we're working on, Crowfall, we've done, I think, around $4 million in crowdfunding so far from people who are basically, they're excited enough about the vision of our game that they're willing to help us fund it, some of them knowing that they wouldn't be able to play it for months or even potentially, longer. So that's a whole different model of product development, because it's really a partnership with those individuals where they're so bought in. They don't want to just wait for the product to come out. They want to be a part of making it. They want to help you shape it, help realize that vision kind of on a week by week or day by day basis. So I think that's a really fascinating and different model, right? It's similar to what you saw happen with the idea of agile development, right? Over the last, I don't know how many years, where the idea is that you're constantly trying to ship something and constantly trying to make your customers happy. Well, this is taking that not just in a B2B or a selling to my executive foundation, but taking it out as a B2C base, right? I'm actually now designing and developing a game in front of a crowd with their constant feedback. The analogy that I use is that it's kind of like we told people we were going to build a restaurant, we released the menu, and they're all now sitting out in the restaurant waiting as we not just cook their food, we have to build the kitchen. So it's this interesting kind of, got to keep them entertained, got to keep them excited about the project, got to tell them what we're doing. But over here, we're also trying to build this product in real time, and they can see everything we're doing. Like we don't have an NDA, they can see everything that's going on as the product is being made. So it has its own challenges, but it's also, it creates a certain amount of strength in your organization because there's a feedback loop of that excitement. As you get excited about an idea and put it in front of them, you're vetting that idea, and then they're telling you where they're excited, and then you get the immediate feedback to take back, and the team gets excited. So it kind of creates this positive reinforcement loop that I'm hoping, we don't know yet, but I'm hoping will carry into launch. The interesting thing is we've amassed that crowdfunding money. We haven't spent any marketing, any appreciable marketing. We've done a few limited test runs just to try out some basic little AdWord kind of stuff. But I mean, our total marketing spend is, I don't know, maybe $10,000 over the course of the last 3 years, something like that. Like, we've built that up entirely virally, and that's not us, that's our community, right? That's our backers doing that for us. So it's humbling, it's flattering, and it's terrifying all at the same time.
Yeah, I can imagine. And it's also, crowdfunding is an innovation that gaming pushed that other business technology companies have also aped or learned from.
Right.
I wonder, it may sound counterintuitive, but are there dangers in listening to that crowd as well? Is it possible that the audience may say they want something, or your backers may say they want something, when in actuality it could lead the business in a deleterious direction?
Absolutely. So I kind of look at it as, you've got two basic foundational pieces, right? You've got what the users say, and then you've got what the users do. I'm sorry, I'm kind of fisheye, so I should probably back up if I'm using my hands. I talk very vibrantly. So you've got what the users say, and you've got what the users do, and you have to kind of take both of those into account, because sometimes what they say they want is not what they want, and sometimes what they're doing over here, they're doing it not for the reasons you expected. Ultimately, I think it comes down to having a very experienced team with a clear vision of what they want to build, and you use both of those to inform your gut. But it does come down to you making the gut level calls. I'm not a person that believes that you can drive a product completely based on user focus tests. I think that that's a recipe for a nightmare. I'm also not the kind of person that believes you can just look at the metrics and just run an algorithm and say, oh, well, they did A, B, and C. The numbers say this, therefore that's going to result in a great game. Games are particular in this area, right? They're not just a craft; they're also an art. Hence the name art craft, right? So we take both of those into account. We use them to inform our gut, and then we make the call, and we go out and make the game that we think is going to be the most appealing.
With respect to in-app purchases, or in this case, items, where do you draw the line? So I really like looking at King Studios, or as you mentioned a moment ago, the developers of
like Supercell,
Supercell.
Sure.
And I think that these were true innovators who found ways to monetize a product and to make it widely available. Are there dangers with that as well?
Oh, of course. It's all entirely depends on your audience and what kind of an audience you're going after. So there are some audiences that are going to be way more open to the idea of, well, let me get in and play it, and I'll just play it for free. And then if I like it, I'll give you a little bit of money. There are other audiences like ours that are like, don't nickel and dime me. I really want to just get in, get the experience, and I want to be able to, it's a competitive game. I want to know that I'm playing on the same playing field as everyone else. So we've had to be very mindful in deciding, with virtual items, for example, what items are we willing to sell, and what items do we say, no, that's not fair, and therefore we're not going to do it. And that's a delicate line to walk, because there's no one clear answer for every person. I mean, there are certain things that people agree, oh, this is fine, we don't care if you sell that. And there are certain things that everybody agrees, well, this is not fine. There's a whole lot of stuff in the middle that we've had to be very careful to thread to make sure that we don't step over the line in a way that our users are going to be upset about.
And finally, Todd, I think I could ask you questions all day long, but I really want to talk cyber before I let you go. In gaming, again, we kind of look at these as trolls, and trolls will be trolls, and they'll behave in a particular way. But really, trolls can cause significant damage to an enterprise, and of course, the rest of SMBs and enterprise companies are kind of realizing that things like ransomware can have a huge impact on their bottom line.
Right.
Um, Gaming companies have been dealing with DDoS attacks, ransomware, and other forms of cyber attacks for a long time. Are there defensive tactics that you have figured out that other companies can learn from?
Well, certainly, I'm sure there are, and I don't know. I'm not saying we, we in particular, the games industry as a whole. I'm sure there certainly are. What I've seen is, so I mentioned earlier that the gaming audience is incredibly cutting edge, right? That means that they are kind of at the forefront. The good side of that also is a flip side, which means that they're also incredibly savvy, and there are bad actors, right, out there who will use those technologies to come after you or come after your business. It used to, historically, it's kind of been, they did it for the lulz, right? They just did it because it was fun or it was funny or entertaining. We have seen an uptick lately in people that are doing it for more malicious intent. There was a game that came out recently that, the day of their launch got a DDoS attack with a ransom note assigned to it that said, send us, $20,000 in Bitcoins or we're going to take your company offline. We're going to take your game offline. So that's something, that I predict, my guess is it's starting with games, but it's just going to migrate to other companies as well, because why wouldn't it, right? I think that it happened to hit games first because the kind of individuals who were doing that happened to be at the forefront, and therefore they saw that opportunity. But there's no reason to think that that kind of thing is not going to start happening with other firms as well. So there's a ton of lessons that you have to learn in terms of, and some of them are hardware, some of them are software, some of them are operational and procedural, that you have to do to deal with these kind of threats. I'd love to say that there's a silver bullet, that there's just, oh, well, you do this and you'll be fine. But honestly, it is a massive challenge that we worry about constantly, because it's a threat to the business. And I wish I had wonderful answers. I don't. We probably have a little bit more because we've thought about it longer. We've been thinking about it, for a while now, and we've had to deal with it longer. But my belief is that us being at the forefront doesn't just mean we're at the forefront of the good stuff. We're at the forefront of some of the bad stuff too. So we should all kind of batten down the hatches, because those problems are coming. They're going to come to the mainstream companies as well.
Wise words from Todd Coleman.
Yeah, I wish I had a better answer for you other than get ready. Winter is coming.
Winter is coming indeed. And along with it, a bunch of great games. Todd Coleman is the CEO and co-founder of Artscraft. They are the developers of upcoming game Crowfall. Todd, I wonder if you could leave us with, I love far off predictions. And I think all of us kind of like the science fiction fantasy future that powerful hardware can bring us to. But let's look at the short term. What innovations are coming in the next, say, 18 to 36 months that we can really, in the gaming industry, that we could kind of look at and refer people who are not in games to pay attention to?
Okay, so I personally, I think that the biggest crossover area you're going to see is actually in the community management stuff. So the things that we've been doing in online virtual worlds, right? There's a series of kind of rules that we've all learned about how you manage community. How do you deal with trolls? How do you, when is it appropriate to engage with people? How do you deal with them on social media and things like that? Those rules, there's a steep learning curve there. And I think that you're going to start to see more and more companies, as they aggregate these large communities, having to relearn those lessons. And I think the people from online gaming have a unique perspective on that, and a huge depth of experience that other people are just going to be getting started on. I'm not personally that bullish on VR. I think it's really cool. I don't see it as mass market acceptance. And this is highly debated even within this office. So that's just my personal feeling. I do see a lot more application for AR. And I think that initially the two areas you're going to see it happen most are on information management, like warehouse management, things like that, and entertainment. I think, though, there are some pretty severe technical hurdles to get over. So I think that the promise of what people are expecting and have kind of then they think is right around the corner because of, things like Magic Leap videos and stuff like that. I think that's further out than people expect. But some of the things that are going to carry over. Well, let me give you a great example, right? One of the biggest breakout hits in the last year was Pokemon, the Pokemon game, right? Pokemon Go. When that came out, what it did was effectively adapt a bunch of the design ideas we've been using in massively multiplayer online games to a whole new audience and a whole new market, and used it in a whole new way. It wasn't that those ideas, the core concept of the game, the core skeleton of that design, it wasn't completely unique. It's just that it was used in a way that had not been used before, and the results were staggering, right? So I think we're going to see more of that, more crossovers of things that we already know how to do, but have never been tried being done in a new way. I think we're going to see a lot more of that. So it's, from that standpoint, it's a very exciting time. The flip side, though, all the security and stuff like that, that's coming too. So from that standpoint, it's kind of a terrifying time. So you got to take the good with the bad, right?